Making these small changes can really improve the quality of your life, and two, your financial situation. It makes you aware, more aware of your finances. Hi all, welcome to my channel. If you don't know me, I'm Jules. I'm 24 years old and I like to talk about all things personal finance, lifestyle, travel, and beauty. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 7 of my top money tips for your 20s. A little bit about me and my background. I am currently 24 years old and I live in San Diego, California. I work a corporate 9-to-5 in beauty marketing. Around 2 years ago is when I wanted to change my personal financial situation, and so I personally used all of these steps that I'm about to tell you, or tips on how to improve your financial situation. I know it can be a super stressful period of time when your finances aren't that great, and it can really contribute to a lot of anxiety and stress in your life. And so making these small changes can really improve the quality of your life, and two, your financial situation. So with that being said, I'm going to jump into my top tips. So one is to track your income and expenses. For this, I like to use a budget tracker, and I manually input all of my expenses and my income into this tracker. But I know a lot of you don't want to spend the time every day, every week putting in manually your tracker. I do think this is the best option though, because it makes you aware, more aware of your finances if you're manually doing this. But if you are too busy or this isn't something you're really interested in, you can there's apps that you can use, such as YNAB, which stands for You Need a Budget, to track your expenses for you. You just connect your accounts to the app and it'll track it for you. And there's also, I think, Mint, which I've used in the past. I'm not sure if they're still a thing though. Just once a week or once a month, you can go through the app and see where you're spending and what categories. But this first step can be annoying to some people, but this is really this is the most crucial step, because if you're not aware of your financial situation and where you're sitting with your debts and just all your financial health information, you're not going to be able to improve. So taking a look at everything and putting it down into a tracker or an app is going to be the first step in order to start mastering your money and taking control of your finances. Number 2 is opening a high yield savings account. This is literally just like a regular savings account, except it's with an online bank. So it's not a Chase or Wells Fargo where you can go to an actual physical store. These are financial institutions that are all online. So for example, I have mine through Marcus by Goldman Sachs and Ally Bank, but you could also use Citibank, American Express, and these are all banks that I'm sure, or financial institutions I'm sure that you've all heard of before. They just don't have any physical stores, and so that's why they're able to give you a higher interest rate on your money. So for example, I used to have a savings account through Chase and I was earning not even 1%. It was 0.01%, which means I'd get $1 for every $1 or $10,000 on my money, whereas through a high yield savings account you earn 4% on your money instead of the 0.1%. So for every, $10,000, you'll earn $400. I know it's not a major difference, but it's definitely a big enough difference to where you could be earning a couple $100s a year versus $3 a year. So tip number 3, which kind of goes along with tip number 2, is to start saving for an emergency fund, and you want to put this money into a high yield savings account. Emergencies can and will happen, and so it's important to be prepared for them. Recently, just last month, I had to take $400 out of mine just so I could pay for some car damages that happened, but emergencies will happen, and so you don't want to have to end up scrambling and put things on your credit card or asking people to borrow some money so you can pay for these things. You just want to have it automatically, and so you want to have 3 to 6 months of living expenses in your high yield savings account where you can easily pull out the money if something happens. 3 to 6 months of expenses is rent, groceries, utilities, your Wi-Fi bill, your phone bill, things like that. I include just the necessities, so I don't include subscriptions, food out, things like that. I only include the bare necessities. But if you wanted to have a bigger emergency fund, you can include just what your full month of spending looks like. So you could also include food out, shopping, things like that. But I only include 3 to 6 months of actual necessities. And this is really important. You want to start this kind of as a first step if you don't know where to go. this is the first step into like taking action as far as like saving money. Tip number 4 is to start using your credit card and only put recurring expenses on this, such as like subscriptions. In your 20s, it is important to start building your credit. That way you can show banks in the future, if you want to take a loan out on a house or a car or whatever, that you are credit worthy basically. But you don't want to go overboard and start swiping your credit card left and right just because you can. So I encourage you to get a credit card, but only put reoccurring expenses on this just to start out. And then once you've kind of gotten the hang of it over the past few months, then that's where you can start putting more expenses on it, but you just don't want to end up going crazy and end up in debt. So put subscriptions like your Netflix subscription, your Hulu subscription, things like that on your credit card, so you can just start showing that you're using it, but not at a crazy amount. Like, you're not putting every single expense or every single purchase on your credit card. You definitely don't want to do that because that'll just be way too much to start. And then you want to make sure that you pay it off by the statement balance date each month. And then once you've mastered that is when you can start putting, some food expenses on there or whatever you want to put. But I really encourage you, when you first open up a credit card, to not put everything on there. Tip number 5 is to contribute up to the match on your employer's 401k plan. So I know a lot of us in our 20s are starting to get jobs outside of college, and it's usually in our early to mid 20s is where we start to build our career and have our first corporate job or whatever it may be. So during this time, you want to start putting some of your money into your retirement account. That way it can grow substantially. By the time you retire, when you're in your 60s, you can pull out this money. And so a lot of employers offer a 401k plan where they will match your contributions into your retirement account. So for example, I can put up to 4% of my paycheck into my retirement account, and my employer can also match that 4%. So for example, let's say in one paycheck I make $1,000 a month and I want to contribute up to the full match, which is 4%. That's $40 a paycheck that I can put towards my retirement account. So my employer will also put in $40. So in total, from that one paycheck, there'll be $80 in my retirement account. This is essentially free money that your employer is giving to you for your retirement, but you want to check with your HR team to make sure what the match is and what the vesting period is. So basically, vesting means you have to be with a company for a certain amount of time in order to get that full match. So going back to our example, usually companies will do a vesting schedule of 3 to 5 years. So let's say the full vesting schedule is 3 years. After I've been with a company for 3 years, I get all of my employer's contributions. So every time they put in $40, I get that full $40 amount. But let's say I'm only with the company for 1 year and I decide to leave, and their vesting schedule is 33% per year up until that 100%. So I only get 33% of that $40 per paycheck that they gave to me, since I wasn't with the company long enough to get the full match. So essentially, I would only get $13.2 out of that original $40 that they were putting into my retirement account. So essentially, every paycheck, I'd earn my full $40 and then only $13.2 from my employer if I left after the first year. Now, if I stayed until the full 3 years, then I would get that full $40 for that whole time. It's a little confusing. Let me know if you want me to make a full video about that, and I definitely can, but just talk with your HR team if you're not sure how to go about it, and they can help you. My 6th tip is to pay off any high interest debts. And what I personally consider high interest debt is any debt that's over 7%, because this outpaces the stock market. On average, the stock market does about 7% when adjusting for inflation. So whether you have credit card debt, student loan debt, car loans, you definitely want to pay off anything that's higher than 7%. And in order to pay off your debt, there's 2 methods that you can use. There's the debt snowball method and then the debt avalanche method. And so the debt snowball method is basically where, let's say you have 4 different types of debt. You want to pay the minimums on all your debts except for the one that has the smallest balance. You want to pay that one off aggressively until it's gone, and then you move on to the next smallest balance until you've paid off all your debts. So let's say you have 4 debts. One is 100, one is 200, third one is 300, fourth one is 400. You pay the minimums on all of that except for the one that is $100. You want to pay that off as quick as you can, and then you move on to the one that is $200 all the way up until you have no more debt, basically. This allows you to start wiping out those debts that have that small balance on it until you have only the debts that have the largest balance left. So that's the debt snowball method. You can also do the debt avalanche method. This is where you pay all the minimums on your debts except for the one with the highest interest rate. You want to pay that one off as aggressively as possible. And then once that's completed, you move on to the next one with the highest interest debt until all your debt's paid off. So the first one goes by how much you owe, whereas this one, the debt avalanche, goes by how big your interest rate is. So for example, let's say we have those same 4 debts. $100, $200, $300, $400. Let's say loan number 1, which is $100, only has 4%. Then number 2 has 7%. Loan number 3 has 8%, and then loan number 4 has 10%. You essentially want to work backwards because you want to pay off the $400 debt first because it has the highest interest rate at 10%, whereas the one with $100 only has 4%. So that way, in this case, you would work backwards. So you do the one with 10%, then 8%, then 7%, then 4%, until those debts are clean. From a perspective of which is going to save me the most amount of money in the long run, you want to go with the debt avalanche because you would be paying off the loans with the highest interest rate first, meaning you wipe those out that you're accruing more interest on, whereas the debt snowball method just takes off each debt when you have the lowest amount. That way you have less amount of actual debts. You'd only have, like, let's say 3, whereas the other one you'd have 4 debts, but you're paying that one off slowly. There is a spider, so I will be right back. There's a spider! Alright, now that I got that sucker. Okay, where was I? Then my last tip is to start investing into your Roth IRA. For the 2025 year, you can invest up to $7,000 into this Roth IRA account. And this is basically another retirement account that you can contribute to. This basically uses your after-tax dollars to fund this account. And then that way, once you retire in your 60s and you're able to take out the money, you don't pay any taxes on it because you already did when you were putting the money into the account. That's why there is a limit on how much you can put, only $7,000. And essentially you can use different accounts for this. I personally have mine with Vanguard, but you can do it with other different financial institutions, such as Charles Schwab, Fidelity, etc. To open up your account, you just have to fill in some information, and then once your account's open, you can start putting money into the account. And then after you put money into your account, you'd want to invest it in certain stocks or ETFs, mutual funds. And I can also make a separate video on how to invest for beginners because I think that'd be really helpful. I think investing is a lot simpler than it seems, especially if you don't know anything about it. It can seem really complicated and confusing, but in reality, it's actually not that difficult to start investing. But yeah, so once you put in money into your account, you'd want to start investing. I personally mainly invest my money into 2 ETFs, VOO and VTI. These track the S&P 500 as well as the total stock market, and it's a basket of stocks within the one ETF. So you're getting all these different companies, and basically you're already diversifying yourself in your portfolio with this one ETF. So those are the 2 that I personally like to use. So yeah, so those are my 7 tips on how to start to manage your money in your 20s. I know if you can't go through all of these steps, just start off with, the first one. And then once you have really mastered step 1, build onto that and add step number 2. And then once you've mastered step 1 and 2, add on step 3 and kind of build from there. Don't worry if you can't get all the way to step 7, especially in your 20s. It's hard to be able to do all of these things at once when you're managing student loan debts and you're just trying to get into your career and you're not making as much money. It's definitely extremely difficult. I understand if you can't get all the way to step 7, but it's important to start building the foundations in order to become financially comfortable and stable. So these are just the steps that you need to take. And if you're not at step 7, 2025 could be the year that you get to step 5 or to step 6. So I really encourage you to start using and implementing these tips that I shared today, and let me know if you've started using any of these tips or which step that you're on, or what are some goals for 2025 that you want to achieve in your personal finances. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you. Bye.